This video will take you through the steps of creating your very first scene in Blender 2.9 and creating a PNG output. So when Blender first comes up, you'll see this scene and we'll just select General. Now the first thing that you want to notice is that you're in object mode, and you see that up here in the upper left. We're going to go ahead and add a plane to the scene. So I click on Add, Mesh, Plane. Now you'll see that the orange rectangle here is showing you where that plane is going to show up. And then I'm going to go to the left over here and click on this icon to scale that plane. Now I see the white circle here, and I'm going to left click and drag so that I drag that plane out. So now we have basically the ground. I'm going to go click on the cube in the middle that comes up by default. And now I'm going to click on the icon for moving. When I do that, if you look, there are reference frames here, and they're there for rotating, scaling, and moving. And in this blue one here, if I drag on that, it will move the cube up. If I drag the green one, it'll move it to the right, and the red one will move it toward me. You can also drag on these little squares, and that will constrain the movement to a plane. So I just want to move the cube up so it's sitting on top of the ground, if you will. And so I will click on the blue line and pull it until it looks like it's sitting just on the ground. So right about there. The next thing that you want to know is that you can look over here, and all of these tools here make it very easy to manipulate your scene in Blender. If I click and drag within this circle here, then I'm able to just rotate freely the scene. If I click on the zoom icon here, I can zoom in and out. I can also use the mouse wheel. If I click on the hand and drag, I'm able to just move the scene around. And then if I click on the camera, it will switch to camera mode and look through the camera, which is shown by this kind of triangular area here. If I click on that, we can see what the camera would see. Notice that Blender tells you that you're in the camera perspective over here in the upper left. We'll return to this in a little bit, but click on the camera again and we come back to the user perspective. Now let's add some basic color to our scene. To do that, we will change from the layout workspace to the shading workspace. So I click on the shading tab here. So once the shading workspace comes up, the first thing I'm going to do is click on the cube, and we can see that a panel comes up. I can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and click the mouse wheel and drag, and I can get to the different portions there of the tab. So I'm going to just select the base color by clicking on that, and then just change it to a brownish kind of color. So I'll have some orange there and drag it down a little bit so I can see the brownish type of color. Next, I'm going to click on the plane, and if I click on this little ball, we see a material already has been assigned for the brown. We want to create a new material for a green color here, and that tab comes up just like we did before for the cube, and I'm going to click on that base color and make it a green, and I'll make it a dark green, kind of like grass or something here. In addition to the cube and the plane, there appears to be a blurred out image here that looks like it might get rendered, but it actually won't get rendered. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But here we want to look at these viewport icons here. And if I hover over this one, you see it says viewport shading, and all the way over to the right you see material preview, and that's the view that we're looking at right now. It's kind of a flat shading. I can click on this other icon that says rendered, and that shows you a little bit more what it will look like when it actually renders, and you can see the lighting. But if you'll notice, there's kind of a gray background here, and that's actually what would get rendered. If we click on the camera, you can see a little bit even in these corners here, that's what would get rendered in the background. So now we're going to talk about how to create a background color. So I'm going to come out of the camera view, And there's multiple ways to do this, but here we're going to use a mixing shader. So we're going to go underneath where it has Object, and we're going to select World. So now I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we can see this background color here. Now, if I click on this color, I can actually set the background color. So we can do that right here. And let's make it a light blue color, like a sky color. And that does work, except for you have ambient color here that's has a strong influence there. So what I want to do is I'm going to add some more tabs here. I'm going to press Shift A, and for the input, I'm going to select Light Path and put that tab down. Now we'll come back to that in just a second. I'm going to do Shift A again, and this time I'm going to select Shader, and I'm going to select Background because we want to have another part to the background. And then another thing that I'm going to do is Shift A, and this time I'm going to do Shader, Mix Shader, and drop that down. Now we're going to connect these things up properly. So these little panels are really nice because you can just connect them together to form the kind of operation that you want. So the way you do this, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. To disconnect one that's already connected, I'm going to go to the output, and here we are landing on surface, and I'm going to just drag that off, and it will get disconnected, and you can see it immediately affects what's happening in the background. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this mix shader, and the shader, we're going to have its output go to surface of the world output, and we want this where it says is camera ray, we want to connect that, so I'm going to click on that dot and drag over to FAC. I'll move these background tabs a little bit, and I'm going to take the background that has the sky kind of color, click on that, and put its input to the bottom shader, and you can see that the background is already blue, but our cube is a little bit dark. So that's what this background is going to do, and we will click on that background button and drag it to the other shader, and you can see we've lit the scene a little bit. I can come down here and reduce the strength of that color, and that's how I can control that. I can also change this white to some other color because it affects the ambient color. So now that we've got our scene colored a little bit, let's go ahead and move the camera. And to do that, we want to go back to the Layout workspace. So as you switch over to the Layout workspace, it probably changed your viewport shading to solid. So you can just click on either one of the material preview or the rendered preview to have a nicer appearance. The easiest way to move our camera around is to just click on the camera so that we're looking through it, and then go to View, select Navigation, Walk Navigation. When I do that, if I move my mouse, it will tilt the camera up or left to right. But also at the very bottom, you'll see a number of icons. Notice first on the leftmost, if you left click, it will confirm or set that camera position. If you right click, it will cancel and go back. So now I've canceled, and as I move my mouse around, it doesn't affect the view. So I'm going to go back to the navigation, walk navigation. And if you've used computers to move things around, you can see there's a W to move forward, S to move back, A to move left, D to move right, E will go up, and Q will go down. So you just use those keys to move around and position the cube in a way that you want that scene to be. So just move it around a little bit. And let's say that we want to look through it right like that. Let me back up just a little bit so I can see more. And we will set that as our view. So now once we have arrived at the view we like, we left click to confirm that view. Now we're ready to create the image. So all we need to do is go to Render, Render Image. And that will create an image that you can now save to a PNG. So we can just go to Image, Save As, And there you can see by default it will save it as a PNG. And you can just select whatever location that you want to save your image in, and just save the image. Click on Save As Image, and it will output to PNG. So then you can just close your render window, and of course don't forget to save your Blender setup. So that's the very basics of setting up a scene and rendering it to an image in Blender. Have fun learning Blender.